How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is RuffledRowlit, and welcome back to a brand new video. Today, guys, we got ourselves some Pokemon rumors to take a look at, so sit back, relax, grab yourself a beverage, and let's get right into it. Starting things off with this post right here, which is coming to us from Light. There's a few people who've also posted about it, but we're going to find the original source as well. But here's what he has to say, though, which is Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Pokemon Emerald could be coming to the Nintendo Switch. Yes, ports, right? Now, according to a new report, the Gen 3 Classics could be the next Pokemon games to arrive on the Switch, similar to how we got, like, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green earlier in the year, if you guys remember. Apparently, they might be coming to the Nintendo, bringing them back, the classic Pokemon games to modern consoles. And with the Pokemon Worlds happening later this year, could we get an announcement soon? Which, yes, we do have Worlds coming up at the end of the month, if I'm not mistaken. Pokemon World Championship 2026. I think the dates are, yeah, the 28th until the 30th of August. So it's literally the end of the month, right? Like that weekend of Friday to Sunday. So not next week, the week after next week. So, so we've got 2 weeks until then. But Pokemon Worlds is usually when we get like at least one new announcement. Like one thing is always announced. There's always like, not a Pokemon presentation, but there's always a trailer of sorts on the final day of the event. They show something off. So it is very possible we could get Ruby and Sapphire, Emerald, all this shebang actually announced around that time. Like, I'm specifically gonna be around for those days, streaming, talking, that kind of shit. Specifically because I expect something to be revealed. This could now be very much possible. So where's this all coming from? Well, it all stems from this post right here, from this person called Special Nick, I think that's how you say it, who runs a website of some sort and is the host of a podcast. But he basically tweeted out something yesterday saying, so I went back through my DMs relating to the Zelda console and Pro Controller, and bro, there's so much stuff I completely forgot about that I was told I could mention, lol. Then the second tweet, right, which he quotes what he said last night, is currently the ports of Pokemon Ruby, Emerald, and Sapphire are planned for late September, October. Now, this would be perfect because September is when we're supposed to get another Nintendo Direct. Every September, if you aren't aware, usually there's always a Nintendo Direct around the September time period of the year. That's when we always get a brand new one. And to be fair, that would be the perfect time to release this, because if you think about it, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald are, well, most wanted, like, I think ports we could imagine, besides maybe Heart Gold, Soul Silver. But other than that, the way they did it for Fire and Leaf Green was they announced it slightly before Pokemon Day, and then Pokemon Day during the presentation, they announced it comes out right now, and it dropped that same time, you know, and like it came out that same day as Pokemon Day. So it wouldn't be that surprising if they announce it here and they announce the date of the actual release to be around the same time we have a Nintendo Direct, so people will go and buy it, you know, with the hype and everything. That's always a possibility, unless they announce they're going to do their own presentation or something, which I doubt, or they could shadow drop it on the day itself, like on this day. But the fact that he says September, October makes me believe that it's going to match up better with the Nintendo, like, you know, the Nintendo Direct that's going to be happening most likely around that time. So people, of course, were, you know, mocking him, like, you know, like, oh yeah, so you're making stuff up. And then he's bringing up the fact that this guy has talked about or already knew about the Ocarina of Time remake way back in 2024, or at least like he's implying it on, you know, something along those lines. And if you go back over here to I think the Centro tweet, Centro says rumor about the Pokemon Ruby Sapphire ports coming this year to the Switch this year. So this is pretty huge, if true, okay? Pretty huge if true, because keep in mind, we haven't seen Ruby and Sapphire since ORAS, so it's been a little bit of time. We haven't really seen, like, that generation. Gen 1 got Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee and whatnot, so it's been a while. And the biggest reason I think this is true and most likely gonna happen, and the only thing that gives me hope that this will happen, is one big thing, which is in Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green's port on the Nintendo Switch, there is actually data left inside of the game. Not data that, like, there's obviously going to be data in the original versions of Ruby and Sapphire that references Fire Red Leaf Green for trading purposes and stuff. However, this was altered data that made it essentially look like they were planning on doing a Ruby Sapphire, not Emerald. Emerald wasn't included in that as far as I'm aware, but Ruby Sapphire were included there in the code. There's code making them compatible to trade with each other, Switch to Switch, right? That's the big thing that I want to point out, that the compatibility thing that was in there was specifically there so they could trade with Ruby Sapphire. So that's the biggest thing that gives me like hope that it's going to be happening. Of course, will they release Emerald as well? I don't know. Emerald is the big one, the arguably best one out of all of them. Like, it's the one that probably has the most, like, you know, it's like the most complete version of these games. Obviously, I personally played Ruby, so I would love Ruby, but it still remains, the point still remains that we do have, you know, a less of a chance of getting Emerald, but if we do get it, it is the one that, honestly, releasing all three is just going to sell so much, because there are going to be people who are going to buy the triple pack, so all three. There are going to be people who are going to be buying, you know, just like even look at Fire Red Leaf Green. I think there was somebody who purchased every language version, even though they don't speak certain of languages. Like, there was like a Spanish and Brazilian version, I think, Brazilian Portuguese version, a Spanish version, etc., etc., the Japanese one, and somebody bought all of those for whatever reason. I don't know, because people are crazy, okay? But what I'm trying to say is, this is very, 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 very possible. This is not something that I would say like, oh, it's a 50-50 gamble. This is very, very likely it could happen, and probably will happen, but we're gonna have to wait and see what comes from it, because right now there's not really much to work with, right? There's not really a lot to go off of here. However, there is some other news though, and we're gonna have to go to center here for this. So this is a pretty big one. Apparently, Pokemon wins and waves, and this is pretty freaking huge, actually. Like, you might not think this is massive, but I think this is massive. So, rumor, Pokemon wins and waves will be directed by Hiroyuki Tani, the director of Pokemon Sword and Shield DLC, which, to be fair, Crown Tundra is peak, okay? I think Crown Tundra is great for what it is, right? For a DLC. And Katsuhiko Ichiraku, who is... Ichiraku Ramen? I'm thinking of Ichiraku Ramen from, like, Naruto. Is that the same last name? Or am I crazy? Ichiraku Ramen. Yeah. Either way, the director of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's DLC. So that's interesting, because I think the Scarlet and Violet's DLC was pretty solid. Okay, I think Kitakami is a nice, beautiful location for a game that, other than that, kind of looks at times. I think Kitakami looks beautiful. I think the whole Blueberry Academy thing, I do think it doesn't look as gorgeous necessarily, because it is more flat, open spaces. But that's kind of, I guess, what they were going for. And it was just easier because they had to make two of them. So kind of loses there. But it was more about gameplay and some of the gameplay features that was really nice about Scarlet and Violet's DLC. So the fact that these two are going to be the directors of the Winds and Waves game is pretty huge, because these are not our usual. This is not Omori. This is not Masuda. This is not the people we're used to. This is completely new people. Well, not completely new, but new people for this job, for this position of directing an entire generation, that's much larger than a DLC and or a spin-off or a remake. This is way, way, way larger in scale, because this is the kind of game that they're expecting to sell 30 million copies with, not the kind of game where, you scramble together like, 9 to 10 million sales, which in itself is amazing. Pokemon sells incredibly well. Like, Pokemon, I think, is like, in terms of game sales, like how much they sell per game, it's like one of the highest franchises in terms of total sales of games. Only really surpassed by, like, what, Tetris? Maybe, I think Tetris, GTA 5, I think, is above there, and like Minecraft. I think those are like the only thing that are above it. Pokemon sells a lot, okay? Like a decent chunk. So when I'm looking at this, we're seeing two new people taking on a very big task, but they seem to have been given them enough, like, confidence, that they can handle it. So I'm happy, because that's new people. Let's see what they can bring to the table. Bring in some new IDs, see what you got. Winds and Waves so far from the trailer looks nice, like visually looks beautiful, but we need to wait and see what the actual gameplay is going to be like, which is the bigger question. But this is huge news. This is genuinely, like, actually big news. Like, this is not something we're used to. So I'm very intrigued. But again, Tani reportedly directed the Sword and Shield expansion pass, like, yeah, where he said Ichiraku worked as the director of Scarlet Violet's DLC. If true, this would mean that Shigeru Omori could be moving on from directing the current generation. Interestingly, previous reports have suggested that Omori could instead be directing Generation 11, which, ooh, that could be interesting. And then could Gen 10 really mark the beginning of a new era for Pokemon, which we'll see, right? We'll see. Another thing about Light, though, he posted this saying, could Winds and Waves finally make another appearance at Pokemon Worlds? And this is a big question, because Pokemon Worlds is when we do get some form of, news and information and stuff like that. And we'll see, if anything comes from it. But basically, here's what he has to say. Pokemon has confirmed live streams for several Pokemon XP panels So Pokemon XP is basically a Pokemon experience. It's this new thing they're trying out, where basically just pay us money to buy merch, basically. But apparently, if we look it up here, during this entire, Pokemon World Championship, there's going to, of course, be the TCG and stuff. There's going to be the World Championship of the, VGC. There's going to be Gold. There's going to be Unite, the usual stuff. But there's also the Pokemon Experience, right? Which is in itself supposed to be like an event on top of Worlds where people can go and buy merch and look at cool statues of Pokemon and stuff. But what he says though here is, with the 2026 World Championship just weeks away, this could be the last chance to learn more about Winds and Waves. And with the closing ceremony as also scheduled, yes, so the closing ceremony, that's where all the big stuff, and if there is anything big to announce, that's where it happens. So if there's a new trailer, that's where it happens. If there's new gameplay, that's where it happens. If there's anything important, that's the last chance of the year for them to announce it before we move over and have to wait until most likely the next Nintendo Direct for even a slight mention, and the most likely scenario being Pokemon Day next year, February of 2027, which is the most likely scenario. But there's always a chance. There's always a chance we could get something. Not impossible, but also not like guaranteed either. It's not something I would put too much stock into because there's no guarantees of any of this stuff. It's always possible that we get nothing, which would really suck, but it's also just the most realistic thing, right? Like, we have to be somewhat realistic about the entire thing. So yeah, I think that pretty much summarizes today's information as far as I'm aware. Besides, actually, you know what? Actually, let's include this too. So in case you want to know when the closing ceremony actually happens, so massive shout out to Light here for this. We're actually putting this together. I think he put this together, yeah. So the closing ceremony will take place on Sunday, August 30th. So remember that, at 7:30 p.m. PTD. So PTD, I think, is Pacific Daylight Time. So basically, if you are in San Francisco, it's going to be at 7:30 p.m. your time. If you're in Mexico City, it's going to be at 8:30. If you're in Colombia, it's 9:30. If you are Brazil, it's 11:30. If you're in the UK, it is 3:30. If you are in Spain, so that would be, I guess, my time zone, 4:30 in the morning. Oh, dear Lord. I did not realize it was going to be that. Oh, dude, am I going to have to be awake in 4 in the morning just to watch like a ceremony that is not even going to feature anything probably worthwhile? Yes, I will. And Japan, 11:30 a.m., which I feel like is more doable than whatever we have to deal with in Europe this time around. Fair enough. I ain't going to say much else besides, hey, let's see what happens. Could potentially be some Winds and Waves stuff. We'll have to wait and see. But that's going to be it for today's video, guys. If you enjoyed, drop a like down below, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out, and bye-bye.